right, I'm Chris. Let's do it. All right. So we're going to take a look at our classic Warrior Horses site. Now, the Warrior Horses have put together a list to commemorate the great horse families that about their time. So if we go check that out, right, it's a pretty basic list. They've got the name of the family and they've got the history here, right? Now, we can make that look a lot better, so let's do that. So let's come in here. I've already applied a format that includes a tile props. So if I go to tiles here, now I've got these nice horse crests. Beautiful stuff, right? So that looks cool. And here's a nice tip as well. You notice there's a little star now on all items. So if I were to actually save this view, so I'm just going to hit save on the same one. Now the tiles view or the gallery view is the default. All right, so now when I visit this list, this is what I'm going to see instead of that kind of list view and making someone switch to this nice format I've got. All right, well, let's take a look at this format because there's a couple of issues here and we're going to address. So these are some pseudo-advanced scenarios that do come up quite a bit, especially with our samples or when you're trying to do certain things. So let's take a look at the first kind of set of problems, and that's with theming, right? You see here I've got a nice brown that matches the site brown, but if I go to change that look, and I go to theme and I pick, let's say, the classic teal, and it's still stuck with that brown, right? Because I've hard-coded that color in a couple of spots. But you'll see it even more when I switch over to like one of the dark themes, like dark yellow. You'll see that the two shield icons, because I use the appropriate classes, those switch just fine, right? The text here switch just fine, but my box shadow, this is an SVG element, that's brown. This underline, which is a border, is also brown. Not great, right? So let's take a look. How can we address that? So we'll switch it to teal for this portion here, just so we can see it in action. So if we go in here and we format the current view, I'll make this as big as I can. One of the things you'll notice here is we've got this nice distinction here with layout. So they've actually taken my tile props and broken them out, even though I pasted a real sample directly from the sample repo. Right? They broke it out now between list and the gallery view, which is nice. I don't have to necessarily manage that. In fact, there's a nice design mode. I'm going to go ahead and switch it here. You see there's a card designer. There's some really, really cool stuff. Check that out. Go play with that. But for this particular piece here, let's go ahead and paste that sample back in. All right, let's preview that so we can see it. All right. What I wanted to take a look at here is these colors, right? How can we make these work? Because traditionally, we don't necessarily have classes that allow us to do that with the theme colors. Let's start with that box shadow, right? So a box shadow, right, you normally specify all of these properties here, and then you've got your color at the end. Now, I happen to take the color of brown that I use all over the horse site, which makes sense on the horse site, but when someone else decides they also want to commemorate the great horse families on a non-horse themed site, it doesn't look quite so good. Right, so how can we do that, right? There's no special theme piece I could put in here. Now, if I pull that off, right, so if I just remove that, and we preview that, right, you'll see that now it's kind of the default kind of gray, which is okay, but if I really wanted that to be that brown color, right? Instead of doing that, I can actually add. So if you take away, we'll just do this. We'll add attributes. And we'll do this guy right here. So we're going to add a class. In this case, we're going to add the class of MS font color. Right? We're going to say theme primary. Right. So if we preview that, you'll notice that if you do not specify a color as part of box shadow, it'll pick up on whatever the text color is here, right? So in this case, we do have a way to set that to a theme color. So by doing that, now we have a box shadow that's theme, sensitive. In fact, let's take a look at that in just a minute at a time. Right, so that's really cool. So that's a neat trick. We're going to do some similar stuff here, right? So that's how we handle box shadow colors. But what about this border underneath here, right? So if we go down here, all the way down where we've got our title here, so we just got, that's the formatter. All right, we just got this div here, the text content's just that title. All right, and we've got this border bottom, where again, we're doing that same brown color here. All right, and this is okay, but what if we, want to specify that color as well? Well, you can't do that as part of this kind of border property here. So what we can do is we can specify that out separately, right? So one of the things we can do is we can add, if we added just like before, we're going to add the same kind of thing. We're going to add that attributes. Ooh. Oh, I can't space it over. We'll just do it manually. There we go. Make it look pretty. All right. Now we're just going to take what we wrote before, which is adding this instead of font color, though, right? We have this nice border color. So that seems like that should work, right? We'll preview that. It didn't work, right? It's still that brown. So let's take the color out, just like we did with the box shadow. And if we preview that, still no good. In fact, now it's kind of that default black. It's a little hard with the brown and the black. So what we need to do is we actually need to break this out into separate properties. So if we go bottom style, we'll set that to solid. And then we'll set that bigger so we can see it. And we go border bottom width. All right, so we can set these properties individually. We can say 2 pixels. All right, and then we don't put a comma on there, and we preview that. There we go. Look at that. So by not specifying, not using that kind of a roll-up CSS property of border, or border bottom in this case, right, we were able to specify the color by doing it through the class. Now, what if, I mean, I don't really like that, right? What if I want that to only show up on hover? Well, we can actually do this nice thing where you go dash dash hover. All right, let's preview that. And let's take away, and then we say the MS border color is normally, right, we're going to say white. And so there we go. Now when we hover over it, ooh, I got a fancy hover, right? So which works nice with my hover card there. Right, so that's pretty cool. So again, another way to kind of take advantage of those theme colors. Now, what about this SVG element? All right, so if we go down here, right, or up here, actually, I should say, we got our SVG element. You know, where all that exciting stuff with the horse, right? Traditionally, you do that with a fill, and again, I've put that in here. All right, so can we do something, you know, fancy? Yes, is the answer. So let's take a look, right? So if we take this, you know, you could set fill to red, right? And that would work as well, right? But if I want that to be theme sensitive, let's try and paste one of those classes in here as well. All right, let's bring it over. And this is just for my own. You don't need to format it properly, but I like to. Okay. We've got our class. So we see a font color theme primary, right? So that seems like that would work, right? That nice teal. So let's preview that. Oh, we've got to fill in here with red. So let's take fill out entirely. Sorry, Phil. All right, preview that. It doesn't work, right? It did not pick up on that. So this one has a slightly different trick, right? So if we paste fill back in, we actually have to put a little piece in here. We go so fill, and we say current color. And we say current color and preview that. Bam! Now it's going to pick up on whatever the font color is, right? So now we have our nice horse crest, and they're all theme sensitive, so I'm going to save that, and let's take a look here. So if we switch back between the themes, all right, we'll change the look, go to theme. If we go to our horse, we've got our nice browns are all working, right, and we've got all the teal, right, we've got the green. Even if we go to dark yellow, right, you'll notice everything now is theme sensitive. Awesome, that's really cool. So that's several techniques for that, and then I've got one more little trick here. All right, so let's not do this dark yellow, wherever this is. We'll go back to teal just for fun. Let's say we're going to get out of here. Now, what about, you know, this is okay. We've got our custom card props, right, sitting there on that title, which is cool, right? And it shows this nice thing, and that's awesome that we can do that. But what if we wanted to show it for the whole thing, right? So let's adjust where we put that. So if we go in here and we're going to format that current view, let's scroll down to where those custom card props are. So we accomplish custom card props by specifying this element here. All right, we open on hover. We want that little beak, which is that little triangle. All right, and then we've got our own little formatter where we can put whatever we want in there. In this case, we've just put a box, and we put the history in it. All right, but we want that to show up on everything. So what if we took, you know, our custom card props here, and we're just going to cut them, right? Because you can specify those on any element. Come up here, and we say, why don't we put that on the root element, right? So here we've got our root element, which is probably that one. Let's see. Yeah, this is this one, right? So we put a comma, we paste it in here. So I'm not going to bother fixing that, right? But if we preview that, it should work on the whole thing, right? It doesn't. So here's a strange quirk with custom card props. If you have any children inside your element, custom card props will be ignored entirely, right? Which can be really frustrating. So you might be tempted to put, you know, just copy paste this custom card props on, you know, on the shield, on this, or if you've got lots of elements, right? So say you've got an icon and text, you're trying to use that as a button for a hover, right? That quickly gets very, very frustrating. So here's a little trick we're going to show you. And that's the idea that instead of doing that, let's undo that. All right, let's, there we go, get rid of that. We'll get an extra comma there. All right, so now we don't have our custom card props, but if we have this root element here, right, and we set the position of it to relative, we can go down into its children. So its children, right? We go down here and we can add another child. So right here, add one. This one, we're just going to add basically a dummy element, right? So let's do this. And let's say wah, 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 wah. All right, elm type. And we're going to say it's a div because we don't really care, right? And the only thing we really care about here is we're going to put those custom card props in there. Right, but in order to make that work, we need some styles. Because we don't want just an extra box at the bottom, right? So style, let's add that here. And in this case, we're going to set its position to absolute, which means we just want it to be over top of everything, right? But in order to do that, we're going to set its top to 0. We're going to set its left to 0. And we're going to set its right 0. And I bet you can guess what we're going to set the bottom to. That's right, 0. Bam, right? So we do that, and if we preview that, aha! Now we put this element that we've put as 0, 0, 0, 0 all around it, so it's hovered over. There's nothing inside of it, right? But it's hovered over the whole thing. So now we can put that hover card over all of the card, which is really cool. So again, if you've got an icon, you got text, you know, you've got something a little more complex than a single element, this is the kind of technique you use. Wrap them up in a relative container, and then stick them next to each other, right here, like that. Again, check out the sample to see how that all worked. All right, so there we go. Very exciting. Let's take a look at a review, and then I'll hand this over to someone else. All right, so theming tricks, that box shadow. Remove that color from the property, and then you can use those theme colors for font color as needed, right? So there's theme primary, theme secondary, ordinary, tertiary. There's a whole bunch of them. You can check those out on the UI Fluent site, or Fluent UI site. All right, for SVG fills, like we talked about, you got to use this current color for the fill, and then it'll automatically pick up on the font color. All right, and same with border color. Split those out from the simple border property into border width and border style, and then you could then use those border colors with the theme colors. And then last, like we talked about, custom card props ignored when children are present. So again, use our little technique there to position a dummy element over everything you want that hover card to work on. All right, and finally, be sure to check out the full documentation. This sample is available called Horse Press. Check that out. It has both the sample before and the sample after with details on the little advanced tricks I did there. Okay, that's all I got. Thanks, everybody.
Excellent. Thanks, Chris. It's just amazing to see you edit those pages and the layouts. One question, actually, was it Joshua who asked, just to clarify that as well, will these work in a list formatting web part or list web part if you apply them to the list? It does.
And in fact, if you specify that, so the tiles, again, if you save that as the default, that's also going to work for your web part. The hover cards and all of those and the theming styles will all work as well. And in fact, if we come in this with Microsoft Lists, right, instead of I came directly to the SharePoint site, which you can see I'm picking up the SharePoint theme, these theme colors will then take up those Microsoft Lists theme. It's going to have that purple and some other look to it too. So it allows your format to be super flexible as you copy it among sites or use it inside List or inside SharePoint or even bring it over into Teams.
Exactly, inside Team as well, because there was a question related on that one. So basically, inside of the Teams, it's the same implementation which works in the Microsoft Lists, inside of the Microsoft Teams, or in a SharePoint list, or in a web part. So all of that works flexibly without any issues. Anyway, thank you, Chris, on that one. Really cool stuff, and it's like I said, it's awesome to see how you know exactly what you're doing on the attributes and everything else. It's just amazing.
Well,
but yeah, yes.